Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast.
Today, we're launching into a deep dive that I think tackles one of the most magnificent, complex, and just enduring stories in all of literature.
We're unpacking the genius of Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra.
Exactly. And we're really exploring that fundamental tension, between these soaring, beautiful ideals and the often stubborn, dirty reality of the material world.
That's right. Our mission today is to move past the sort of simple summary of the crazy night-fighting windmills.
Mm-hmm.
We want to really immerse ourselves in the core sources and the analysis to find those profound insights, the little nuggets of wisdom that are buried deep beneath all the comedy.
And a big part of that is looking at how Cervantes dissects perception, identity, and the very act of storytelling itself.
Before we saddle up, though, I think it's crucial to understand a bit about the author himself, Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra.
Yes, absolutely. He was not an armchair philosopher. I mean, this was a man who lived a life of extreme experience. He was a soldier, fought with distinction. He was wounded and severely at the Battle of Lepanto.
And after that, he had a pretty harrowing experience as a captive.
He did. He endured 5 years as a captive in Algiers. So he faced the absolute harshest realities of war, poverty, and imprisonment.
So when he writes about idealism, he's really doing it with the authority of someone who knows exactly how brutal reality can be.
Precisely. He's not critiquing high ideals from some safe distance. He's fusing them with these undeniable physical truths he experienced firsthand.
And that collision, that's what immediately sets the stage for our protagonist.
It really does. We meet the Spanish younger, a gentleman who suffers from the ultimate occupational hazard of reading too much.
He just consumes all these tales of chivalry until they completely take over his reality.
They supplant it entirely. He becomes convinced the world is decaying, that it's lost its greatness, and that he alone must restore it by becoming a knight-errant, Don Quixote of La Mancha.
So it's the journey of a man who decides he is the hero the world needs, driven entirely by ink and paper.
And that act of self-creation, which is fueled by this profound delusion, that's the essential tension that just runs through the entire narrative.
Okay, so let's unpack the mental architecture of this delusion.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just a simple case of insanity, is it? It's a meticulously constructed alternative reality.
Oh, completely. Don Quixote doesn't just wait for history to happen to him. He pre-writes his own historical record. He's constantly envisioning this wise enchanter who's going to chronicle all his feats.
So he's basically his own press agent.
His own PR agent and historian all rolled into one. He imagines how this future history book will describe his very first morning ride, and he borrows really heavily from, classical epic poetry.
Right, like with Apollo and Aurora.
Exactly. Apollo spreading his golden threads, the colorful birds greeting the rosy aurora, and then the great knight rising to traverse the ancient field of Montiel. He sees his life as a guaranteed script, written in this magnificent, epic language.
That's a remarkable level of commitment to a fictional identity. I mean, how deeply does he integrate this?
Well, he explicitly claims later on that while he knows his own name, he has the capacity to embody all the pears of France and even all the 9 sons of glory.
So he thinks the literary framework gives him the template not just for action, but for a complete transformation of himself.
That's the key distinction. For Don Quixote, literature isn't just entertainment, it's an instruction manual for existence.
And because the manual dictates a world of magic and valor.
He has to literally transmute the mundane world around him to fit that script.
Okay, this brings us to the wonderfully comical and confusing part of the narrative. The literal physical transformations he sees. This is often the aha moment for anyone coming to the text for the first time.
Absolutely. So let's start with the setting. An ordinary, probably somewhat smelly inn, a Schenke.
Becomes a magnificent castle.
A herrlich burg, a glorious castle in his perception, yes. The fat, peaceful innkeeper is instantly elevated to a lord of the castle, a burgern.
And even the people working there get an upgrade.
Oh, absolutely. The common Asturian barmaid, Mary Tornes, who is described as having a flat head, a heavy back, and being blind in one eye, she is perceived by Don Quixote as a highborn princess.
Wait, if he's so convinced it's a castle, why does he sometimes seem to fear that it's enchanted? Wouldn't a real castle be perfect?
That's the elegant defense mechanism of his delusion. When anything unpleasant happens, like he gets beaten up or the food is bad, he doesn't question the castle.
He questions the magic.
Exactly. He fears his castle might be enchanted, which conveniently explains away any harsh, unchivalric realities that dare to intrude, like bad smells or physical pain. The magic is the scapegoat, not his ideal.
And the items he transforms are just legendary. We have the poor barber who's just trying to keep the rain off his head with his brass basin.
And suddenly finds himself accused of stealing Mambrino's helmet.
A legendary helmet made of pure gold.
Yes, and Quixote insists that this brass basin is Mambrino's helmet, only it's been broken down and disguised by some treacherous enchanter. He even demands that it be taken to a smith for repair because in his mind it's high-value gold.
But surely the barber argues with him.
Yeah.
I mean, how does Quixote rationalize the sheer physical obviousness of the basin being, well, a basin?
He manages this by just doubling down on the meta-narrative. He'll concede that, okay, to others it may look like a common barber's basin,
Okay.
but he maintains that the wizard who's protecting him, or maybe the one tormenting him, has made it appear that way so that common thieves won't steal his treasure.
Ah, I see. So the deception isn't aimed at him. It's aimed at the rest of the world to hide the true value.
It's a brilliant way to keep his ideal intact while still acknowledging a contradictory reality.
And then, of course, there's the magnificent construct, Dulzeda of Toboso. She is the flawless, sweet-smelling, idealized flame of his heart, the whole anchor of his existence, really.
She has to be flawless, otherwise the knight's quest is completely meaningless. Quixote describes her in the most flowery terms, a sublime princess who smells of liquid amber and is this rose among thorns.
Yet the sources give us the delightful, messy truth of who she actually is.
Exactly. Her real identity is Aldonza Lorenzo, a decidedly rough peasant girl.
And she's famous for one particular skill.
Yes, the source material notes with marvelous specificity that she is famous among the women of La Mancha for having the most skilled hand in salting pigs.
Salting pigs. That one detail just summarizes the entire novel's satirical genius, doesn't it?
It really does. He's out there risking his life for the ideal of a princess whose reality is inextricably tied to porcine butchery.
And this dichotomy is never really resolved for him. When Sancho later points out that he suspects Dulcinea smells a bit strong, Quixote just dismisses it.
Immediately. He suggests Sancho must have a cold, or perhaps he has a poor sense of smell from eating too much garlic. He cannot allow the idealized perception to be breached by something as vulgar as a bad scent.
But here's the tragedy of it all. While his ideals are magnificent inside his own head, the consequences of those ideals are often brutal and entirely external.
That's right. Look at his first official act of justice.
The boy Andres.
Yes. Quixote comes across a peasant beating Andres very severely with a belt for losing some sheep. So Quixote, in his full chivalric glory, demands the farmer stop and pay Andres his back wages.
Which the farmer promises to do.
He does, and Quixote rides away, completely satisfied that he has succeeded in abating all injuries and illegalities.
And what happens the second the knight is out of sight?
The farmer takes Andres back into the woods and beats him even harder, fulfilling his promise to pay Andres only after the interfering knight is long gone.
So the justice Don Quixote thought he administered was not only temporary, but it actually resulted in a far worse outcome for the victim.
That is such a crucial lesson in the book. His idealism is utterly impractical in the real world. He achieves an internal victory, a feeling of noble achievement, but the external reality is disastrous for the person he was trying to help.
And this pattern just repeats itself, doesn't it? Like with the confrontation with the merchants.
Yes, demanding that merchants he's never met praise Dulcinea's beauty as a matter of principle, but the moment he confronts them, what happens? His frail horse, Rocinante, stumbles and collapses.
The fragility of his physical endeavors constantly undercuts the quest.
Yes, the magnificent ideal is always undercut by clumsy reality, symbolized perfectly by his poor, haggard horse.
So if Don Quixote is the pure, magnificent architecture of idealism,
Then his squire, Sancho Panza, is the immediate, visceral counterpoint.
he's the sometimes groaning, often hungry weight of reality.
The contrast is immediate and it's financial. Don Quixote seeks intangible rewards, eternal glory, renown, a mention in the Book of Fame.
But Sancho is purely transactional.
Completely. He agrees to follow this deranged gentleman because he sees a concrete material reward, a governorship, an island to rule, or maybe, a mainland kingdom like Denmark or Solidisa.
He's the ultimate mercenary of the imagination, in a way. He finds great delight in the adventure, not because of the honor, but because he's constantly fueled by that tangible hope of a governorship.
You see him riding behind his master, just contentedly eating and drinking from his leather bottle. It's a very physical, grounded joy that Quixote never seems to experience.
And unlike his master, Sancho is an uncorrupted censor. He might be fearful, he might be superstitious, but his senses are sharp.
Absolutely. When Quixote sees a mighty army raising a cloud of dust, Sancho provides the instant reality check.
He just hears sheep.
I hear nothing else but repeated bleating of sheep and rams.
Quixote always has an explanation, of course. Fear confuses the senses. But that seems contradictory, doesn't it? Sancho's already terrified most of the time. If fear confuses the senses, wouldn't he be more likely to see armies instead of sheep?
That is the beauty of the satirical structure. Quixote needs to protect his delusion, so he projects it onto the world. He insists Sancho's failure to see the army is a side effect of fear, not proof of his own error. So when they see men in white robes carrying torches, Quixote sees ghostly specters. Sancho just sees funeral attendants. His common sense overrules the fantasy, even if his body has to pay the price.
And the physical cost is paramount for Sancho. He suffers these repeated, agonizing beatings from peasants and the various victims of Quixote's misguided interventions.
There's a lament he has later in the book that perfectly encapsulates his materialistic suffering. He literally calculates the pain.
How does he do that?
He suggests that if the beatings he's endured were taxed at 4 maravedis, a tiny Spanish coin per blow, 100 gold coins wouldn't even cover half the pain.
Wow. He's quantifying his suffering in currency. It's a tangible debt owed by the world to his body.
Which leads directly to the infamous Balsam of Fierabras. This is the ultimate symbol of Quixote's self-deception colliding with Sancho's material body.
It's this homemade, magical cure-all.
It is. It's mysterious and vile. When Don Quixote is badly wounded, he prepares this remedy using whatever herbs and ingredients he can find at the inn.
And he drinks it in the processes.
It is. He vomits violently, sweats profusely, and essentially purges his body of all illness. And then he wakes up feeling completely cured, believing he can now face any danger because he has this miraculous restorative.
So it works for Quixote both spiritually and physically. But what about Sancho?
Well, Sancho naturally is skeptical, but he agrees to try it. He also vomits violently, sweats, and endures the pain. But unlike his master, he does not experience that magnificent cured feeling. He's just left utterly miserable.
Yeah, I can imagine.
When the potion is mentioned later, Sancho expresses this violent aversion. He says just hearing the name of the balsam makes his soul turn over, let alone his stomach.
So for Quixote, it's a miracle. For Sancho, it's just horrible physical pain.
Exactly. But we also see a fantastic evolution in Sancho. He starts as this simple, mostly silent, fearful squire, but the rigors of the road force him to develop a voice.
Much to Quixote's great annoyance.
Oh, yes. Quixote repeatedly critiques Sancho for being far too talkative. He holds up the silent squires of legendary literature as models to follow.
Right, like Gandalin.
Gondolin, who supposedly became a count through his silence, or Gasabal, whose name is only mentioned once because he was so quiet. Quixote demands Sancho maintain proper distance and respect, seeing his chatty nature as completely unchivalric.
But those talks are often where Sancho's unique, earthy wisdom comes out. He starts relying heavily on proverbs and simple truths.
He does. He uses these proverbs, these short, often coarse bursts of folk logic, to ground Quixote's soaring rhetoric. The text itself eventually comments on this evolution, noting that Sancho's later, more sophisticated speeches seem a little spurious given his otherwise limited mind.
So that's the metafiction kicking in again. Is Cervantes telling us that this simple man is actually learning and growing, or is the narrator just admitting he's making up clever speeches for his character?
I think it's both. I think Cervantes is demonstrating that even a mind primarily concerned with food, drink, and cash can arrive at profound, pragmatic truths.
His wisdom isn't academic, it's observational.
Exactly. He understands the mechanics of human behavior, even if he doesn't know the proper rhetorical terms for it. He might not know the difference between Apollo and Aurora, but he knows the difference between gold and a dirty barber's basin. And that fundamental grounding makes him, ironically, the most reliable ethical compass in the entire story.
One of the things that makes this text so rich is that it doesn't just rely on that central comic tension. Cervantes weaves in these long, incredibly detailed narratives that function as counterpoints.
Yes, showing us what true grounded tragedy looks like, often involving themes of honor and love that Quixote can only approximate. The structure is almost like a Russian nesting doll.
And the first major one we encounter is the tragedy of Marcella and Grisostomo.
Right. This story is pure romantic idealism, but it's framed within a realistic pastoral setting. Grisostomo, a brilliant and high-minded gentleman, dies of grief because his love for the shepherdess Marcella is unrequited.
This sounds like a pretty straightforward, conventional chivalric tragedy. The cruel, beautiful woman causes the sensitive man's death.
But Marcella completely flips the script. She delivers one of the most powerful and insightful defenses of female autonomy written in that era. She actually crashes his funeral to address the mourners who are accusing her of cruelty.
And what's her argument?
She argues forcefully that beauty is a gift from heaven, something unchosen, and she should not be held responsible for the desires or the madness of others.
She basically says, my existence is not your right.
Precisely. She uses this brilliant analogy that her beauty is like a distant fire or a sharp sword that harms no one who doesn't approach it. She chose solitude, she was clear, she offered no hope of love, and therefore Grisostomo was killed by his own obstinacy.
That's a stunning moment because it's a critique of the very romantic ideal that Don Quixote holds so dear.
Then we shift to the plight of Dorothea, whose story is more about social vulnerability and betrayal, less about abstract romantic ideals.
Right. Dorothea is a beautiful woman from a good family, and she's seduced by the nobleman Don Fernando.
Under false promises of marriage, yes. He tells her she will be queen of the entire globe.
High promises leading to harsh reality, again.
After he betrays her, Dorothea is left desperate and disgraced. She flees her home, disguises herself as a peasant, and seeks refuge in the rugged Sierra Morena. Her story provides a crucial example of real, complex human suffering caused by moral failings, not magical enchantments.
And what's fascinating about Dorothea is that her tragic reality becomes essential to the central plot.
Absolutely. The sane characters, the priest and the barber, realize that to successfully lure Quixote back home, they need a theatrical plot that fits his delusion.
And Dorothea plays a part.
A huge part. She uses her acting skills to convince Quixote that she is the Princess Micomicona, queen of the great kingdom of Micomicon in Ethiopia, who desperately needs his chivalric aid against a fearsome giant.
So the real victim of betrayal now has to embrace performance and deception to manipulate the delusional hero. Her human tragedy is co-opted as a necessary plot device. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
That shift from stage tragedy to real-world high-stakes heroism brings us to the final major embedded narrative, the captive's tale.
And this is maybe the closest Cervantes ever comes to writing his own memoir.
I think so. This story provides the ultimate baseline for what genuine courage and suffering look like, contrasted with Quixote's imagined battles.
So this is real history.
Exactly. The captain details his background. Serving under the Duke of Alba in Flanders, fighting in actual battles, and joining the historic campaign under Don Juan de Austria that fought the Turks. This is verifiable military history woven into the fabric of the fiction.
And the story revolves around his captivity in Algiers and this Moorish girl, Zoraida.
Zoraida is a beautiful young woman, deeply pious, and she's inspired by a vision of Layla Marian, the Virgin Mary. She believes she must escape her father's house in Algiers and flee to a Christian land to find salvation and marry a Christian nobleman.
So this is a life or death decision motivated by intense religious conviction, not some romantic whim.
Not at all. And she initiates the escape herself through highly practical, dangerous means.
How does she do that?
She communicates with the Christian captives by dropping money and a letter written in Arabic into their yard explaining her intentions. This adventure is filled with actual gold, actual military risk, and the tremendous non-negotiable consequence of discovery.
The source material even suggests her father would have killed her if he found out.
Yes, that he would have thrown her into a well and buried her with stones. That is a harsh, immediate consequence that dwarfs any of the imaginary dangers Quixote faces.
The captive's tale shows us real-world heroism risking life for faith and freedom in stark opposition to Quixote's self-defeating attacks on wineskins.
It creates a vital dialogue within the novel. It asks you, is heroism defined by intent or by result? Quixote's intent is noble, but his results are chaos. The captain and Zoraida's intent is survival and conversion, and the result requires concrete, painful action.
One of the most radical aspects of this novel, and what makes it feel incredibly modern, is its constant self-awareness. Cervantes uses these metafictional devices that continually remind you that this is a book about a crazy person who thinks he's in a book.
It starts with the elaborate joke of the source material. The narrator claims to have found the true history of Don Quixote, written in Arabic script, being sold by a boy in a market in Toledo.
Right, and he hires a translator, a Morisco, who immediately bursts into laughter.
Upon reading a marginal note, yes.
The famous note about Dulcinea and the pigs.
Precisely. The revelation that Aldonza Lorenzo is best at salting pigs. The irony is layered. The supposedly objective historical source, the one the narrator must rely on for truth, is itself mocking the hero's grand illusion.
So it instantly destabilizes the whole concept of objective truth in historical record.
And the sources even describe the accompanying historical illustrations. The depiction of Don Quixote's fight with the Biscayan is mentioned, noting how realistically Rocinante is drawn, so long and stretched, so thin and haggard.
So even the illustrations, meant to document his bravery, instead highlight the miserable, pathetic reality of his horse.
The historical evidence is constantly undermining the epic vision.
Which leads us to the scenes that feel like an internal literary critique of the entire genre, starting with the famous book burning.
The priest, the farer, and the barber go through Quixote's library, believing the books are the absolute cause of his madness, and they pass judgment on the merits of each book. It's a literal purification of the source of his delusion.
And they single out Amadis of Gaul as the ultimate culprit.
It's condemned as the original heretic and founder of the evil sect of chivalric novels. Cervantes is using his own novel as a courtroom to judge the entire literary tradition that came before him.
He's acknowledging their power while also condemning their reckless disregard for reality.
And this critique is elaborated upon later by the canon, the Domherr, who's a man who understands literature deeply.
And what's his argument?
The canon argues that contemporary plays often fail as a mirror of human life because they ignore crucial elements like chronology and place. For instance, a character might age from a child to a bearded man between Acts 1 and 2.
So Cervantes, through the canon, is defending the classical virtues of structure and verisimilitude.
Yes, but the canon isn't dismissing chivalric tales entirely, is he? He still finds merit in the raw material.
No, he extols their potential. He argues that these stories provide a wide, spacious field for a writer to describe shipwrecks, battles, heroic commanders, virtuous ladies. The material is rich with imagination, even if previous authors executed it poorly.
So Cervantes is basically telling the reader, I'm using the same ingredients, but I'm applying structure, context, and crucially, realism.
And the ultimate proof of his success is the second part of the novel, where the book itself becomes a recognized historical document within the story.
Yes, the text acknowledges that a written history, the second part, is now circulating. Don Quixote and Sancho Panza are no longer anonymous madmen, they are known characters.
So Sancho, the humble squire, is now a celebrity.
A reluctant one, yes. He's worried that his reputation in the book will precede him, especially if the narrator refers to him as a scoundrel.
That's fascinating. His reputation, forged in fiction, has now completely transcended his local reality.
Yeah.
The narrative has become more real than the man.
His fear is palpable. He realizes that this fame is a double-edged sword. He's famous, but he has no control over the narrative that defines him. The pursuit of glory, which was Quixote's initial goal, is achieved not through heroism, but through the narrative capturing his absurdity.
The moment the fictional narrative achieves its ultimate power is when Don Quixote and Sancho encounter the Duke and Duchess. They've read the book, they know the characters,
And they decide to step into the story themselves.
This is the novel's centerpiece of cruelty and sophistication.
It really is. The aristocratic couple recognizes them instantly from the published history, and they decide enthusiastically to engage in Quixote's delusion purely for their own entertainment.
So the world no longer just seems like a chivalric landscape to Quixote.
Yeah.
It's actively, theatrically constructed for him.
That raises the stakes entirely.
Yeah.
In the first part, Quixote is fighting against reality. In the second part, reality is fighting back, but pretending to agree with him.
And their favorite target for manipulation is the core of Quixote's quest, the tragedy of Dulcinea.
Right. Quixote explains to the Duke and Duchess that his princess was transformed from sublime beauty into a hideous, jumping peasant girl by a malicious enchanter.
The aristocratic couple uses this explanation to devise the ultimate plot to control and torment him.
They stage this massive, elaborate fraud centered on the disenchantment of Dulcinea. Merlin, the wise enchanter, arrives in a theatrical flourish.
Announcing the only possible solution.
And that is, Sancho Panza must voluntarily administer 3,300 lashes upon his bare back.
3,300 lashes. It's an incredibly specific, physical, painful transaction required for an entirely abstract, idealized Dulcinea's beauty.
It is the ultimate quantification of idealism. The fate of the sublime rests entirely on Sancho's flesh.
And his practicality kicks in immediately.
Oh, he's horrified, but he recognizes the transaction and he starts negotiating. He agrees to the lashes, but he insists on controlling the time, the location, and crucially, that the blows must be gentle.
Like swatting flies.
Exactly, not delivered with a cat o' nine tails. He's essentially saying, I will perform the required punishment, but I control the material cost.
This whole sequence is really a critique of aristocratic boredom and cruelty, isn't it?
Completely. They are so privileged and bored that they use a man's madness and his squire's desperation for office to create theater. They turn their guests into puppets.
And the height of this manufactured spectacle has to be the Clavellino adventure, the magical wooden horse.
It is pure performance art. They introduce the Countess Dolores, the Kammerfrau Schwarzenreich with her famously barded, hairy face, who demands Quixote and Sancho ride the magical horse, Clavellino, to right a great wrong.
Quixote, of course, accepts immediately. And the subsequent flight is just a masterpiece of deception.
They're blindfolded, placed on the non-moving wooden horse, and then the Duke's servants simulate this perilous flight through the region of fire-blowing bellows, throwing fire, creating tremendous wind effects.
They believe they're soaring through the heavens, experiencing G-forces and extreme heat, even though they never leave the ground.
Right. And once again, Sancho's pragmatism finds a way to blend with the spectacle.
How so?
When they land and find a parchment confirming the adventure is completed, Sancho insists that, despite the strict instruction not to, he briefly lifted his blindfold to steal a look at the earth.
And what did he see?
He claims he saw the earth below and it looked no bigger than a mustard seed.
Is he lying, or has he finally crossed the line into fully participating in the narrative creation himself?
That's the magnificent ambiguity. He is definitely participating in the grand theater of Quixote's life, whether through acceptance or through his own creation of verifiable yet wildly unbelievable sensory detail. He understands that for the narrative to continue, he has to provide the necessary confirmation.
We've dissected the literary anatomy of this incredible work, exploring the collision of ideals and the strange power of reputation. So let's try to consolidate the central statements, lasting takeaways from Miguel de Cervantes' monumental achievement.
Okay. The first, and I think the most enduring finding, is that tension between idealism versus reality. The novel lives in that rich, uncomfortable space.
Quixote's magnificent internal world versus Sancho's painful external one.
Exactly. Quixote's world is filled with destiny and princesses, and it's always being shattered by Sancho's world of vomit, beatings, and dirty inns. The book argues that this dichotomy is just inescapable.
And secondly, the text serves as this profound critique of heroism.
Yes, Quixote attempts to emulate the ancient heroes, but his actions like freeing the galley slaves only lead to greater chaos and personal harm for himself and for Sancho.
So conventional literary heroism is shown to be self-defeating in a non-chivalric world.
Right. True nobility might exist in the intent, but true effectiveness requires a grounding in consequence.
And finally, perhaps the most innovative takeaway is the sheer power of narrative.
The story demonstrates how fiction shapes reality. In the first part, books cause madness. In the second part, the published book grants Don Quixote and Sancho celebrity, turning them into known quantities.
So Sancho, the reluctant squire, learns that his identity, defined in print, transcends his actual wealth or status.
Yes, the fame generated by the narrative becomes his most valuable asset, even if it's a source of anxiety for him.
It is truly stunning that Cervantes wrote a story about a character whose life was dictated by the books he consumed, and then made that narrative a physical thing that characters within the story could read and then use to manipulate him.
That's the final irony. The pursuit of being read and remembered, the core drive of epic literature, is achieved not through true heroic acts, but through the narrative capturing even the most absurd behaviors. We're left questioning what truly constitutes history and what is merely compelling fiction.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. If Don Quixote's life was shaped by the chivalric books of his time, what are the modern-day chivalric books that shape our perception of reality? Are they idealized career trajectories, social media personas, or political narratives that promise us a glorious quest? And what is the actual physical cost, the equivalent of Sancho's 3,300 lashes that we must endure in the pursuit of those magnificent yet ultimately fictional ideals? The text suggests that the freedom or reward we seek, whether it's Dulcinea's disenchantment or a governorship, often requires embracing absurdity and accepting unexpected painful transactions.